Welcome to yet another review. This time we're going to be taking a look at the prequel to Breath of the Wild. Well, not really a prequel, but we'll get into that later in the review. So I played this game earlier in the year, and I've now decided that it is a good idea to make a review for it. It's been so long, and so because of that, I've had to remind myself on some things, but that's good because it means that I will be less influenced by my initial reactions and more influenced by what the game actually brings to the table. So I can self-reflect on the things that I thought was really bad at first or really good at first, and now I can just level it down and make it more contained. I'm going to be going through the positives and slowly make my way to the negatives. And by the way, just a small warning, there will be many spoilers, so if you haven't played the game yet, I suggest you go elsewhere, unless you don't really care about the game itself and just want to hear my thoughts. One of the great things about Age of Calamity is its gameplay. Not only are you met with constant fast-paced missions and a huge range of characters to play as, but there's also a variety of abilities to be used during these missions. These abilities were first seen in Breath of the Wild, with Stasis, Cryonis, Magnesis, and Bombs being the four main abilities used. In Age of Calamity is the same concept really, but now you get to use all four for crushing the enemy. So what makes these abilities great to use is the fact that they're all high impact abilities, meaning they'll be very useful in battle, as well as the fact that the nature of the abilities change per character. So for example, if you use bombs as Link, you'll see Link throw a volley of bombs like this, like in this motion, at the direction you're facing. And then if you use the bombs as Zelda, you'll be able to control a really large automaton. I don't really know what to call it, but yeah, it's basically an automaton. It is what, a bomb dispenser? I don't know. It just shoots out bombs. It shoots out bombs. But that's not all, because every single ability changes depending on each different character. Do you know how many characters are in the game? There are 18. That is a lot in comparison to previous Zeldas where you can only play as one Link. All 18 characters have their own very unique playstyle. Now, not all these characters are fun to play, but most of them are, and this is really great for this kind of game because it means that the missions are going to feel much more varied because of the many characters you're able to play. Are you tired of playing as a sword-wielding knight? Well, just play Rivali, who literally flies across the battlefield. Are you bored of him too? Well, how about you play Sidon, who has literally a smile button? Well, okay, not him too, he's not your cup of tea, but how about the literal king of Hyrule? Yeah, there's a lot of variety, and it actually helps the game a lot. I haven't even mentioned how you're able to have 3 different rods in the battlefield, so Ice Rod, Fire Rod, and Lightning Rod? I think it's Lightning Rod, not Electricity Rod. But yeah, they are all specific elemental themed items who help destroy elemental themed enemies. So if you're going up against a fire enemy, you use the Ice Rod, obviously. If you're going up against a ice enemy, use the Fire Rod. And it alternates between the two, so I think also electricity helps against ice. I don't remember the details, but yeah, all 3 of those rods are really important in helping you win many of the fights you're going to be struggling in. So in terms of the fights themselves, forgetting about the wonderful variety and abilities you have while playing, you'll find that the enemies themselves are pretty good too. I didn't mind the fact that the smaller enemies, so bokoblins, Zozophos, and amongst others, are extremely easy to kill because they come in large clusters. So it'll typically take one hit to kill them, one big swipe, you just kill a horde of them. There are even sometimes larger variants of these enemies, so a large bokoblin or a large Lizarphos, and they serve to be the captains of the keeps you're meant to capture throughout the missions. But I don't really see there being an importance in capturing these keeps unless the mission specifically tells you to. These enemies aren't a bore to kill because they're also pretty simple to overcome. So at first you'll be struggling, but then as you level up, it's so much easier. It's so much easier. There are mini boss style enemies in the game too, who serve to present more of a threat. And there are also main bosses who you fight throughout the game. So for example, Koga is a boss you fight twice, and the second fight is my favorite boss in the game. So that's when you're in the Yiga hideout and you're fighting Koga, in the ring room, where in Breath of the Wild you fight him too, and then Suga comes along, and then you're fighting him too. It's just like big chaos, but it's not chaos because it's actually cool. I actually like it. Asta is also a boss in the game, and you also fight him multiple times, but the only fight I really found fun was his first fight. So that was in Lost Woods. That was the only fight with him I really found fun. Even if I didn't enjoy all the bosses and all the times we fought him, I think they still helped in the variety, because in comparison with like the Moblins and the what's it called? The Hinox, and the other ones, the rock guy, the Magnus Stalis, the rock guy. So yeah, it really helps the variety. So each of these mini bosses had their own elemental variants too. So fire, ice, lightning, as I said before, and this also helped the variety much more. If you were to look at the enemies on the field throughout the missions though, you'll find that the variety is kind of deceiving, because there's basically a handful of enemies in play, and it doesn't really help. One mission you're going to be going against a horde of bokoblins, and then the next mission you're going to be going against a horde of bokoblins, and then third mission you're going to be going against a horde of bokoblins, and then bokoblins, and then more bokoblins, and then Lizarfoss. Okay, we're back to bokoblins. It doesn't help. It really doesn't help. It's not really Age of Calamity's fault, because of course this game is based on Breath of the Wild, which is a game that has pretty bad enemy variety too. So I'm not going to really get into that, but you get why that could be a bit lackluster in that department. So the map system serves to be a good replacement for the expansive world presented in Breath of the Wild, so you don't have to explore the entire thing again, and it helps to connect the missions together pretty easily. It's practically a hub, with shops and the like being available to you upon finishing missions. There are also side missions in this map, which provide you with important materials needed to upgrade your gear, but I never really cared for them. I can't really state if they're good or not, because of the fact I only played 2 or 3 of them. So yeah, I'm not really the guy to talk to if you're thinking about talking about side missions. What I can decide, however, is the quality of the main missions. These missions follow a general format and rarely become a bore to go through. For the most part, I enjoyed making my way through the missions, as I was having immense fun with the characters I was playing, and each of the missions seemed to be unique enough to separate them from each other. But as the game went on and the hours continued rising, I found that I was having less and less fun with the game overall. This is probably due to the later missions reusing many of the enemies and themes from earlier on, and so it felt like I've really already played them. Sometimes though, the missions were a slog to get through, and this was especially true the second to last mission, All Hyrule United, as it starts off with you needing to kill 4 main bosses across the entire map, followed with you needing to kill a Malice Lionel, only for the Blood Moon to rise. And the Blood Moon means that you have to do the entire mission all over again. You have to kill the 40 mini bosses across the whole map. You have to kill the Lino for the second time. And it was just a horrible mission. I really hated this mission. It just became clear that the reason the Blood Moon even existed was just to stretch the game time even more. Luckily though, this was the only instance really in which I was extremely bored, as all the other missions were pretty good to go through. It was pretty good. And so the missions overall aren't really bad. There's only a few missions, especially the one near the end of the game, that began to get very repetitive. So yeah, I think that gets a pass. How about the graphics? Well, they were practically the same as Breath of the Wild's, and so there isn't really much to talk about here. All the missions had wonderful environments, and the variety of environments is to be greatly appreciated. Throughout the game, you would go to Death Mountain, the Great Plateau, Hyrule Castle, the desert, the Yiga Clan hideout, and so much more. If there's anything to be bored about in this game, the graphics aren't it. There's probably one thing I can complain about in terms of graphics, but it's almost a nitpick. I feel like at times the graphics can be quite clashing, with some realistic looking stone surfaces being placed right next to some cartoony style grass. To top this off, all the characters are pretty much cartoony too. And so when you stand next to these realistic surfaces, you can notice a stark contrast between the two. Although that isn't annoying per se, and so I'd really like to reiterate the fact that I still really do like the graphics of the game. Seeing them in Breath of the Wild was great, but seeing them again in this radically different style of game, gameplay wise at least, helps in providing a new insight in the graphics themselves. And this doesn't work to the detriment of the graphics. it actually helps in making them look more refined. Probably because they are more refined. And, you know, Nintendo likes upgrading in their graphics, and they probably did that here, but that's besides the point. So the music in this game, I really can't begin to state how grand the music in this game felt. I really did enjoy the songs in this game, and I don't think I can think of one inherently bad song that I heard. Each of the songs served their purpose and suited the situation they were made for. There were remixes of songs from Breath of the Wild, as well as new songs that were made for some of the new characters in the story. Each of the songs sounded great, and is perhaps the best thing to come out of Age of Calamity. Seriously, probably the best thing. I would probably rank some of these songs at the absolute top of all Zelda songs, but I'm probably getting ahead myself. There isn't really anything else to say here, because I'm no music expert, but I'll have to just leave it at that. I really like the music. All you need to know is that the music was great, sounded very grand, and helped to serve the game immensely. Now, you're probably wondering, where are the negatives? You said you would talk about the negatives later in the video, but you're only talking about the good things. And you're right. I have been talking about mostly positive things, because this is the final thing to talk about. The story is perhaps the absolute worst thing about the game, and ruins the entire game. The lack of direction and carelessness of the story overshadows any positives I had for the game, and perhaps even makes me regret liking the game in the first place. Let me put it into perspective, okay? The story is pretty simple. First, imagine that you, Link, have lost the fight against Calamity Ganon, and so you have been gravely injured. To save you from death, you are placed into a healing chamber where you rest for 100 years. Once you recover, your goal is to now take back the 4 divine beasts that Ganon has captured and then face Calamity Ganon himself. Now, that's the entire premise. That sounds pretty simple, right? And like a great premise for a game. Well, you've already probably guessed, but that was the story for Breath of the Wild. The story for Age of Calamity is much different, because while the game is set 100 years before Breath of the Wild, it does not follow the same formula. You are going to be playing the game just before the Calamity wins, right? Now, the aim of the game is to go through these events, building towards the end, so the beginning of Breath of the Wild, and witness the war firsthand. But there's this little egg robot thing that comes from what seems to be the future. So they're already messing with time. This egg basically destroys the entire plot of the game, and simply put, the egg attempts to warn Zelda of the outcome of Breath of the Wild. And so Zelda and the rest of the gang attempt to avoid that future being Breath of the Wild. In avoiding this future, they are met with Koga, Suga, and Asta. Asta is the main villain, but he is not menacing at all. He is a mockery of a villain. Suga is probably the only menacing villain. Koga is just a meme, as he always is. I don't mind that. But Asta was built up to be menacing, and he was laughable. He was horrible. His fate was just to be a bad villain. So, Asta has its own egg. Asta has his own egg. I think this egg comes from the Age of Calamity world. So the original world, I guess it's original world. And he uses this egg to help maintain the timeline to allow Calamity Ganon to win. So he wants Breath of the Wild to happen. And the good guys want Breath of the Wild to not happen, right? So they want to save their own world and change the timeline. Anyway, young Robbie and Pyrrha are also present in the story. And in one cutscene they get captured by the Yiga clan, right? But then they don't, because they're completely fine a few cutscenes later. I don't understand. Like, if you're going to have this cutscene of them being captured, why was it completely forgotten about a few moments later? Why even have the cutscene in the first place? At the very least, a mission could have appeared in which you had to go and save them? Like, no? Why wasn't that a thing? Well, they help to figure out what the egg is actually for. I say this because Zelda, even though she made the egg in her childhood, she has no idea what the egg is, because I think she has memory loss. Some people say that the egg was willed into existence by the Triforce, but that's just really a bad plot point, because then that means okay, yeah, Zelda doesn't remember this because even though she will have memories later in the story of her making the egg as a child, the egg was just willed into existence. Her actual memories were not with the egg, and the Triforce just put false memories into her brain, making her think that she knows the egg, but in reality she has never seen the egg before. Is just a bad plot point. The egg just randomly appeared and now is going to save the day, but it's not going to save the day because Breath of the Wild still happened. The egg just leaves the Breath of the Wild world and abandons them all. The egg came from Breath of the Wild's world. Like, the good egg came from Breath of the Wild's world. It came from the future, which is Breath of the Wild's world, I believe. That means it saves the day by going to Age of Calamity world, but abandons Breath of the Wild world entirely, leaving those people to just die. Because if it's like a timeline split thing where you go into the past, right? This is like the Breath of the Wild timeline. You go into the past and then you start around and doing stuff. It just splits off, right? And then there's a new timeline, but this timeline still exists. The Breath of the Wild world still exists. This is Age of Calamity world, and now it's in this world. And in this world, it's all destroyed still, so it's not going to help this world, even though it's actually from this world. It's confusing. It's just confusing. I don't understand. While Zelda deals with her memory loss or whatever is going on there, the King of Hyrule, so King Boss Ramus Hyrule, goes about his kingly business, but then dies. He just dies. Okay, well, okay, he doesn't actually die, because later in the game it's revealed that some random thing Zelda gave him is actually a shield, and then that saved him from death. What a plot twist. I couldn't have thought of this if I tried. It's actually insane. Forget about that, because Asta is the more important character here, because he actually succeeds in resurrecting Calamity Ganon. Because yeah, apparently Calamity Ganon isn't fully revived by the end of the game. He's been stuck inside the bad egg the entire time, despite being able to create blights, amongst other things. Once Calamity Ganon has his full power though, he just kills Asta, because apparently he needs to harbor a body, and apparently Asta is full of malice, so it's a win-win for Ganon. Asta's dead. He's not a good villain, so I don't mind this. That was fine, but in the plot, it's like, okay, you just introduce a villain and kill him immediately. That is very Zelda of you. But after killing Ganon, no one's gonna care about that death that much. Ganon then possesses normal egg because, ooh, spooky malice, and then runs away because minion do my bidding. You end up fighting Calamity Ganon in the end, and then you win because the normal egg who got possessed and you destroyed, but then wakes up because it's not destroyed fully, because story, it then kamikazes into Ganon, finally destroying Calamity Ganon for all. Did you keep up with everything that I said? No, you didn't. This game might as well be part of the Puyo Puyo franchise. I'm not gonna lie. It basically is a Puyo Puyo game. Asta is basically Feli. It's just sad. But now, let's compare the premise of Breath of the Wild with this abomination. So in Breath of the Wild, 100 years ago, Calamity Ganon won. In Age of Calamity, set 100 years before Breath of the Wild, Calamity Ganon lost. He lost. So, what does this mean for Breath of the Wild? Is Breath of the Wild now non-canon? Is Age of Calamity now non-canon? Are both games just in separate universes? Do they just not exist? If Age of Calamity is in a different universe, then how is it that the normal egg, coming from the future, where Calamity Ganon won, how did it travel to the past? The alternate universe past? If it's just future and past, it would have just went back, right? And then it would have branched off. But like, I'm dying. I'm dying. Another thing, why did they advertise the game as being set 100 years before Breath of the Wild if it isn't even set in the same universe as Breath of the Wild? This might mean that Breath of the Wild exists in two different universes. One where the egg is traveled from would be the universe of Age of Calamity, and then the second would be where the egg doesn't even exist at all. The egg doesn't even exist in Breath of the Wild anymore. It never did. It's just a retcon. Can we just question how Asta got his own egg? Because like, people are saying that it's the egg that exists in Age of Calamity before time travel stuff, right? And if that's the case, how did he get it? Like, did he just infiltrate Hyrule Castle and then conveniently find the egg? Or did like Calamity Ganon possess the egg and ran out of Hyrule Castle himself? Or is it that the Triforce actually did will the egg into existence, implanting fake memories into Zelda, and then the egg just like appeared in Hyrule Field, and then that just so easy for the Calamity Ganon to take it over? Like, what? What? How about the fact that it's now true that the egg did exist in Age of Calamity before the time travel stuff? Meaning that the egg should too exist in Breath of the Wild, because arguably both universes should be identical before the game. So basically, if it's true that the Triforce willed the egg into existence in the future, right? And then went to the past, and then branched off. That means that there was only one egg, right? But Zelda made the egg in her memories, meaning that existed well before Age of Calamity even happened, as well as Breath of the Wild, right? So that means that the egg exists in the past, but got willed in the future, and then went to the past, and then branched off. There's 2 eggs in Age of Calamity world, and then there's an egg in Breath of the Wild world, but the egg in Breath of the Wild world does nothing at all, even to the future. If that's the case, that means that in Breath of the Wild, the egg simply decided to not save Hyrule by time traveling like it did in Age of Calamity. And I could talk about this all day, but I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop now. I just really hate this story. I'm sorry, it's just so bad. They were given a really easy story to work with. Basically a tragedy where you just play through the war and then you lose at the end. That's all they had to do, but they ruined it all. The voice acting improved somewhat since Breath of the Wild, but it wasn't that great either. Asta was probably one of the worst Zelda villains ever in all of its history, and the voice acting he was given was just upsetting, you know, but was also as horrible as it ever was. Wait, I didn't mention how all the descendants of the champions managed to also time travel to the past, meaning that this game's universe has to have come from Breath of the Wild's universe. Meaning that the Breath of the Wild world still exists, because they came from the future. The egg time travels, it does not jump universes, meaning that Breath of the Wild's universe should still happen after Age of Calamity, because those champions exist in the same form that they did before. Okay, I'm done. I'm seriously done. I can't do this anymore. I need to conclude this review. I need to conclude this video. And just to end the video, I'm gonna say one thing, and one thing only. Please stop messing around with time travel, Nintendo. It's too risky of a story to write with, especially with your expertise. And please stop trying to have voice actors. Like, I can understand the attempt, but like, with this kind of story, it doesn't really work that well, unless you get good voice actors. If you get good voice actors, then sure, use voice actors, but at least find good ones. I can't take this story seriously at all, and it just really hurts the positive I pointed out earlier in the review. I can't even remember if I gave this game any positives. That just shows how horrible the story is. I just need to have a good long stare at the sun. It'll just help me right now. Like, it's much better than listening to me talk about the story for a second time. This entire review. That's the review. I'm gonna give Age of Calamity a 3.5 out of 10. Not because of the gameplay being bad, or the music being bad, or the graphics being bad, because the music, the gameplay, and the graphics were actually really good. I liked that. I just hated the story. This story was horrible. I despised the story. The voice acting was pretty bad as well. But Zelda's voice actor actually improved. So that's a positive in terms of that department. But the story is probably one of the most important parts of any Zelda game. Especially for a Zelda game that isn't a dungeon romper and it's just a Dynasty Warrior style game, right? Like, story is so important there. But yeah, they messed it up. They messed it up big time. And I'm just done. Okay, I'm just done. Thanks for watching. I'm gone. Okay, I'm gone. Goodbye. Goodbye.
None of this makes any sense.